And Gandalf, the wizard, suggests that they need a professional burglar to help them in their quest. And in the Shire, there lives a hobbit called Bilbo, who is the very epitome of a well-to-do bourgeois. A bourgeois is a member of the middle class, and the word is in fact derived from a German root called Burg, and it refers to a city or a castle. And the word burglar is derived from the same root. And thus the perfect bourgeois must be a perfect burglar. And so opposites become one. And Bilbo is a little intrigued by the prospect of helping in the quest, but mostly he's quite timid and punctual, and he has to be forced and pushed into the journey. And the dwarves and Bilbo go on several adventures as they journey east, and Bilbo picks up that magic ring, which is later very important. And when he becomes invisible because of the ring, the dwarves suddenly start to think, oh, he must be a very good burglar because he can sneak up to us so very well. But the magic ring doesn't figure too much into the hobbit. And they finally arrive to the lonely mountain, the dwarves and Bilbo, and they have to, Bilbo must check what is inside there. And Bilbo crawls in the mountain and finds the dragon's Smaug there and finds out that he has a weak spot in his stomach. But Bilbo goes back away from the mountain, and but Smaug realizes, as a very cunning dragon, that this must have been some sort of a spy. He's actually quite slow in realizing it, considering he's extremely cunning dragon, but in any case. And Smaug, the dragon, goes from the lonely mountain and is shot by an arrow in the very place that Bilbo had pointed out. So it seems that everything is going all right, and the dwarves regain their kingdom and their treasures. But the elves and the people around, the men surrounding the Lonely Mountain want recompensation for helping defeat Smaug. But the dwarf king Thorin is corrupted by his greed and will not give anything to the other people, and locks himself inside the mountain. But then things turn for the worse, and all sorts of different evil creatures from around, orcs and trolls and everybody, tries to invade the Lonely Mountain because it seems that it cannot be defended very well. But they just barely win the battle because not all dwarves are helping. With the final assistance of some eagles and other forces from the west, we finally save the situation. But Thorin is wounded because of the battle, but he finally realizes his foolishness and repents which he had taken the treasure completely from himself. He would have even given anything to Bilbo, who was one of the who should have gained 1/14 of the treasure because he helped the 13 dwarves. But in the end, Bilbo and the dwarf king Thorin reconcile, and the treasure is divided between the 12 remaining dwarves. Bilbo no longer has desire for the treasure, and so he takes only a relatively small portion of it with him back to the Shire. Nevertheless, he becomes amazingly rich and a legend inside the Hobbit community. But the moral of this story is that nobody can control their own lives. Bilbo had everything precisely under control, but he was forced into a situation he couldn't have expected. Bilbo became a hero because he was forced into the situation, not because he was inherently humble. So it is unlike in the Lord of the Rings, Frodo gets the task because he is a humble hobbit, but this is a petty bourgeois and not a very nice character at all, in fact. But he has to see, because he is such a small character, he eventually sees that he cannot actually do anything great when he is taken into adventures. And he sees how small and powerless he actually is, and his bourgeois aspects are dropped, and he becomes a burglar. But on the other hand, the dwarf Thorin goes through an opposite kind of development, and because he has a rightful desire to regain his treasure and the kingdom of his people. But this rightful desire is transformed into greed. Because he shut himself out of cooperation, his kingdom was almost destroyed. So the petty Bilbo becomes humble, and the noble Thorin becomes proud. So the question that arises from this work is, if we do not move our own lives, we can't move our own lives to a better cause, who does, and what is the force that makes us better? Is it just other people or impersonal forces like destiny? In philosophical theology, there is a term called primum mobile, which means the primary mover, and refers to God. And although it is never explicitly said that perhaps he is behind the events of the story in The Hobbit, and this is only glimpsed in The Hobbit that there is another force, a moving force. But the force is mentioned in The Lord of the Rings, that there is another force that wants to defeat evil, and is independent of what we might think. But in what Tolkien considered his magnum opus, his primary work, the Silmarillion, this moving force is explicitly mentioned several dozen times, and he is Elwin Ubasar, the one father of war. And here is still Smaug the dragon and Bilbo the sword. Bilbo is supposed to be invisible, but he is not really invisible there. And here we move on to the Silmarillion. And the Silmarillion tells the entire history of Middle-earth. It is not strictly speaking a novel, because most of the stories are told in a form more similar to history books. It is not historical fiction, but a fictional history book. Many people used a different style in The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. If they read the Silmarillion and after them find the Silmarillion to be a difficult book. This applies especially to the first few chapters, since the story proper, the story of the Silmarils, the jewels, and the war of elves against evil, doesn't start off immediately. But in fact, when I myself read the Silmarillion, I didn't feel like with all. I was absolutely enchanted by the story from the very beginning. But Silmarillion starts off with the story of creation, just like the Bible. The title of the story, of the creation story, is Ainu Lindai, music of the Ainu. And it is a creation story, and in which God, the one, creates the holy ones, who are called the Ainu, who are equivalent to angels. And God himself composes themes and conducts the music of creation that the angels make. The music describes the story of the world that has not yet been created. The world has not been created, but unfortunately, into the themes of creation, one of the Valar, the powers, desires, one of the angels who make the music desires the creative power of God for himself. And this satanic figure of Tolkien, the fallen angel, is called Melkor, he who arises in power. So Melkor starts to corrupt the themes, so that the other holy ones try to win the evil music of Melkor with majestic music, but they fail. Only when a new, frail, sad but beautiful theme arrives is the theme of Melkor absorbed in the music and made poignant and meaningful. The frail theme is the theme of the children of God, of men and elves, who are separated by death and immortality. But the music of the Ainu does not just create the world. God does the creation by his own word. He says the word, Ea, let these things be. So it is like in the Bible when God says, let there be light, and there was light. And after creation, the Valar, the powers, go down to the world and start shaping it according to God's plan. And the story of the creation is followed by an account of the Valar and who they are. But the primary characters of the Silmarillion are not the Valar, the powers, but they are the children of God, elves and men. The story proper concerns men and elves, and the story proper is Quenta Silmarillion, the tale of the Silmarils. It tells of the fall of the high elves and their war against the evil Melkor. And the elves awoke first. Elves are the first children of God.